What if the scariest stories you've ever heard were true? It's a question that lingers in the back of your mind, especially late at night when the world is quiet and shadows stretch across your walls. Most of us find comfort in routine, the familiar rhythm of daily life, the safety of our homes, the predictability of the people and places we know. We convince ourselves that horror is something that happens to other people, in distant towns or in the pages of a book, never in our own lives. But the truth is, real terror doesn't need an invitation. It can slip quietly into the spaces we trust most, hiding in plain sight until it's too late to turn away. Most people never realize how close they've come to real horror until it's too late. The stories you're about to hear aren't urban legends or campfire tales. They're true accounts of ordinary people whose lives were forever changed by something they couldn't explain, something that shattered their sense of safety and left them questioning everything they thought they knew. Tonight, you'll hear 3 stories that will make you question what's lurking in the shadows of your own life. After this, you may never look at the world around you the same way again. When I first moved into my college apartment, I was excited for the independence. The building was old but charming, with creaky floors and tall windows that let in the afternoon sun. My parents helped me move in, and by evening, I was alone for the first time in my life. The silence was comforting at first, a welcome break from the chaos of dorm life. I unpacked, made dinner, and settled in, feeling a sense of pride and possibility. But as the days passed, I started to notice things that didn't make sense. It began with small noises, soft creaks in the hallway, the faint sound of footsteps when no one else was home. I told myself it was just the building settling, or maybe a neighbor coming and going. But the sounds grew more distinct, always at the same time each night, just after midnight. I'd be reading or scrolling through my phone when I'd hear the unmistakable sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, moving down the hallway outside my bedroom door. One night, I decided to investigate. I waited until the footsteps started, then crept to the door and pressed my ear against it. The footsteps stopped abruptly, replaced by a heavy silence that made my skin crawl. I opened the door and peered into the hallway, but it was empty. The only light came from the street lamp outside, casting long shadows on the peeling wallpaper. I closed the door, heart pounding, and tried to convince myself it was nothing. But things only got stranger. I started finding objects out of place. A book moved from my desk to the kitchen, a glass left on the floor by the couch. Once, I came home to find my bedroom window open, even though I was sure I'd closed it before leaving. I began to feel watched, as if someone or something was always just out of sight, waiting for me to let my guard down. I told my friends about the noises and the strange occurrences, but they laughed it off, blaming stress or lack of sleep. I wanted to believe them, but the feeling of unease only grew stronger. I started sleeping with the lights on, checking the locks on my doors and windows multiple times each night. Still, the footsteps continued, always at the same hour, always stopping just outside my door. One evening, I was studying in the living room when I heard a loud bang from the hallway. I jumped up, heart racing, and grabbed a flashlight. The hallway was pitch black, the overhead bulb flickering weakly. As I shined the light down the corridor, I saw a shadow at the far end, tall, thin, and impossibly dark. It didn't move, didn't make a sound, just stood there watching me. I froze, unable to look away, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. After what felt like an eternity, the shadow slowly faded, dissolving into the darkness. I ran back into my apartment, locked the door, and called my parents, begging them to let me come home. They tried to reassure me, but I could hear the worry in their voices. I spent the night huddled on the couch, every light in the apartment blazing, jumping at every sound. The next day, I tried to rationalize what I'd seen. Maybe it was a trick of the light or my imagination running wild. But deep down, I knew it was real. The feeling of being watched was stronger than ever, a constant presence that pressed in on me from all sides. I started seeing the shadow more often, sometimes in the hallway, sometimes reflected in the windows, always just out of reach. I tried everything to get rid of it. I burned sage, hung up protective charms, even had a friend come over to bless the apartment. Nothing worked. The shadow remained, growing bolder with each passing night. Doors slammed on their own, lights flickered, and objects moved without explanation. I barely slept, haunted by nightmares of the shadow standing over me, its featureless face inches from mine. One night, I woke to find the shadow at the foot of my bed. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, paralyzed by fear as it leaned closer, its darkness swallowing the room. I don't remember what happened next, just a cold, suffocating sensation and the certainty that I was not alone. When I finally came to, the sun was rising and the shadow was gone. I moved out the next day, unable to spend another night in that apartment. I never told the landlord why, just packed my things and left. My friends still tease me about the ghost story, but I know what I saw. To this day, I still wonder if the shadow is waiting for me to return, lurking in the darkness, biding its time. Sometimes, late at night, I hear footsteps in the hallway of my new place, and I can't help but wonder if it followed me. It's unsettling how quickly the ordinary can become terrifying. Most of us go about our days believing that routine is a shield, that the familiar walls of our homes and the predictability of our lives will keep us safe. But the truth is, the line between normal and nightmare is thinner than we think. According to recent studies, a surprising number of people have experienced unexplained events in their own homes, strange noises, objects moving, or the feeling of being watched. Most dismiss these moments, chalking them up to imagination or coincidence, never realizing how close they might be to something truly sinister. We're taught to ignore our instincts, to rationalize away the things that make us uneasy. But sometimes, those small warnings are the only clues we get before everything changes. The next story proves that sometimes, the scariest threats come from outside, just beyond your window, waiting for the right moment to make themselves known. As you listen, remember, the comfort of routine can vanish in an instant, and what seems like a harmless shadow or a fleeting sound might be the beginning of your own nightmare. Living alone in a small house on the edge of town was supposed to be peaceful. I loved the quiet, the open fields, and the way the stars looked brighter without city lights. My nearest neighbor was half a mile away, and most nights, the only sounds were the wind in the trees and the distant hum of traffic. I felt safe, cocooned in my own little world, until the night I noticed the footprints. It was early spring, and the ground was still soft from recent rain. I stepped outside one morning and saw a trail of muddy prints leading up to my bedroom window. They were fresh, pressed deep into the earth, and far too large to be mine. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, maybe a delivery person or a lost hiker, but the prints didn't lead away from the house. They stopped right beneath my window, then vanished. That night, I locked every door and window, double-checking each latch before going to bed. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I woke several times, heart pounding, convinced I'd heard something moving outside. Each time, I told myself it was just the wind or a stray animal. But the next morning, I found a small pile of stones on my porch, arranged in a neat circle. Felt like a message, though I couldn't imagine what it meant. The gifts kept coming. A feather, a broken watch, a single glove, each one left on my porch overnight. I started to dread sunset, knowing I'd find something new in the morning. I set up a camera by the front door, hoping to catch whoever was leaving the objects. But every time I checked the footage, it was blank, just static, as if the camera had been turned off for hours. One evening, as I was closing the curtains, I caught a glimpse of movement outside. I froze, peering into the darkness, and saw a figure standing just beyond the edge of the porch light. Tall, thin, and motionless, it seemed to be watching me. I backed away, heart racing, and called the police. They arrived quickly, searching the yard and the woods beyond, but found nothing. They told me it was probably a prank, maybe a teenager from town, and promised to patrol the area more often. But the feeling of being watched only grew stronger. I started sleeping with a flashlight and a heavy book by my bed, jumping at every creak and groan of the old house. I stopped going outside after dark and kept my phone within reach at all times. The gifts continued, each one stranger than the last. A child's drawing, a lock of hair, a cracked mirror. I showed them to the police, but they had no answers. One night, I woke to the sound of tapping on my window. I lay perfectly still, barely breathing, as the tapping grew louder, more insistent. I forced myself to look and saw a pale face pressed against the glass, eyes wide and unblinking. I screamed, scrambling out of bed and grabbing my phone. By the time the police arrived, the figure was gone, leaving only smudged handprints on the window. The next day, the officers found evidence of someone living in the woods behind my house. A makeshift shelter, empty food wrappers, and a pile of the same strange gifts I'd been receiving. They searched the area but found no sign of the intruder. For weeks, I lived in fear, jumping at every sound, convinced the stranger was still out there, watching and waiting. Eventually, the gifts stopped, and the police assured me the person had probably moved on. But I never truly relaxed. Every night, I checked the locks, closed the curtains, and scanned the yard for movement. Sometimes, I'd catch a glimpse of a shadow at the edge of the trees, or hear footsteps crunching in the underbrush. I never saw the stranger's face again, but the memory of those wide, unblinking eyes still haunts me. Some say the stranger is still out there, watching and waiting for the next person to let their guard down. I moved away as soon as I could, but I'll never forget the feeling of being hunted in my own home. Now, whenever I hear a noise outside my window, I wonder if it's just the wind, or if someone is standing in the darkness, waiting for me to look outside. Have you ever felt like you were being watched, even when you were alone? It's a sensation that's hard to explain. A prickling on the back of your neck, a sudden chill, the urge to glance over your shoulder even though you know no one should be there. Most of us brush it off, blaming nerves or an overactive imagination. But sometimes, that feeling is a warning, a signal that something isn't right. The stories you've heard so far are proof that the line between safety and danger is thinner than we'd like to believe. Think about your own life. How well do you really know the people who live nearby, or the strangers who pass by your window at night? It's easy to assume that horror is something distant, something that happens to other people. But the truth is, it can find anyone, anywhere, at any time. If you think that was disturbing, the last story will make you question how well you really know the people closest to you. Sometimes, the scariest secrets are the ones hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. When I first met Alex, he seemed like the perfect roommate, quiet, responsible, and always on time with his share of the rent. We got along well enough, sharing the occasional meal or movie night, but mostly kept to ourselves. For months, everything was normal. Then, slowly, things began to change. Alex started spending more time in his room, barely speaking, and leaving the apartment at odd hours. I chalked it up to stress or a new relationship, but the atmosphere in our home grew tense, heavy with unspoken words. It was the little things I noticed first. Food would go missing from the fridge, lights left on in rooms I knew I hadn't entered, and strange, muffled phone calls late at night. Sometimes, I'd wake to the sound of footsteps in the hallway, only to find Alex's door closed and the apartment silent. I tried to ask if everything was okay, but he brushed me off, insisting he was just tired or busy with work. One night, I came home to find the apartment eerily quiet. Alex's door was ajar, his room empty except for a single, handwritten note on his desk. It read, "Don't look for me. I'm sorry." My heart pounded as I searched the apartment for any sign of where he'd gone, but his phone, wallet, and keys were all missing. The only other clue was a series of strange symbols drawn on the back of the note, shapes I didn't recognize, but that made my skin crawl. I called his family, but they hadn't heard from him in days. The police were sympathetic but could do little, saying adults had the right to disappear if they wanted. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I started going through Alex's things, searching for answers. Hidden in the back of his closet, I found a box filled with newspaper clippings about missing people, strange disappearances, and unsolved crimes. There were maps with locations circled in red, and a journal filled with frantic, paranoid entries about being watched and followed. The more I read, the more unsettled I became. Alex wrote about a presence in the apartment, something he could feel but never see. He described waking up to find his belongings moved, hearing whispers in the walls, and seeing shadows flicker at the edge of his vision. The last entry was the most disturbing. "It's here. I can't stay any longer. If you find this, get out." After that, I started noticing things too. Doors would open and close on their own. Cold drafts would sweep through the apartment, and I'd catch glimpses of movement in the mirrors. At night, I'd hear whispering voices, just out of earshot, and feel a crushing sense of dread that made it impossible to sleep. I tried to convince myself it was just stress, the power of suggestion, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. One evening, I woke to find the apartment filled with an unnatural silence. I walked into the hallway and saw a shadow standing at the end, tall and motionless. It didn't move, didn't speak, just watched me with an intensity that made my blood run cold. I blinked, and it was gone. The next morning, I packed a bag and left, unable to spend another night in that place. I never found out what happened to Alex. The police eventually closed the case, and his family moved away. The apartment was rented to new tenants, but I heard rumors that they didn't stay long. Some said the place was cursed, that anyone who lived there would be driven out by fear and nightmares. I still have the note Alex left, the strange symbols burned into my memory. Some mysteries are never solved, and some people are never truly gone. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder if Alex is still out there, running from whatever haunted our apartment. Or maybe, just maybe, he never left at all. The shadows in the hallway seem a little darker now, and every creak and whisper reminds me that some secrets are better left undiscovered. These stories linger long after the telling, not just because of what happened, but because of what could happen to any of us. The comfort of routine, the safety of home, the trust we place in those around us, all can be shattered in an instant by the unknown. Each account began with something ordinary. A new apartment, a quiet night, a familiar face. But beneath the surface, darkness was waiting, ready to turn the mundane into a nightmare. As you reflect on these stories, ask yourself, what if the next true horror story is yours? How well do you really know the places you call safe, or the people you let into your life? The truth is, horror doesn't always wear a mask or announce itself with a scream. Sometimes, it slips quietly into your world, leaving you with questions that never find answers. There are countless more stories like these, some too disturbing to ever be shared. The next time you hear a noise in the dark, remember, sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that really happened.